And one more time for good measure. The land on which we gather is indigenous land. West of here, in times past, lived speakers of the Awaswas language, including the Oipi tribe. South of here, to just beyond Watsonville and east to beyond Hollister, the Mutsun language was spoken. The Amamutsun tribal band are living descendants of the survivors of indigenous people taken to missions Santa Cruz and San Juan Bautista during Spanish colonization of the Central Coast. They are working hard to restore traditional stewardship practices on these lands, to heal from historical trauma, and to ensure that Awaswas and Mutsun-speaking ancestors are honored and never forgotten. We remember those ancestors today by learning a word in their languages. I'm holding up a piece of what we call tule. Some people know it as bulrush. Both Awaswas and Mutsun speakers use the same word for this plant, hale. Hale was a prolific plant throughout the land we now call California, growing abundantly wherever there was fresh water. It was used to make baskets, mats, decoys, clothing, and even canoes. There is such a canoe hanging from the ceiling of the Aptos Library with photos of how it was built. Unitarian and Universalist minister Thomas Starr King famously said, "Do what you can with what you have, where you are." Awaswas and Mutsun ancestors needed no such reminders. They lived that philosophy for thousands upon thousands of years on these lands. Rev. Stefanie is going to pass around a box. Take a piece of ha'ale, or hale. And as Carole plays our prelude, imagine people in canoes traversing the bay and other waters of this beautiful part of the world.
Good morning. It is a delight to be with you again. For our opening words this morning for our chalice lighting, I'd like to share a short story that may or may not be true. A long time ago and far away, or maybe not, a child came upon a small lantern in a very dark field Why the child was allowed to wander off in a dark field is a question I have. But in any case, the lantern flickered gently. It flickered just enough to create a little circle of light around the child. The child could see the grass underfoot and an occasional snail scurrying along at snail pace. "Why don't you shine farther?" the child asked. "I want to see the whole path." The lantern replied, "That's an excellent question. But if I showed you everything all at once, you might be overwhelmed by everything that you see, and you might not be able to choose a direction to go in. You might not make it home. You might be here all night long. Focus on what's right in front of you, child. Just start moving. And of course, let me know if you have questions along the way." So the child took the lantern and took a deep breath and started moving forward, one step at a time, one question at a time. "Hey, is that a rock or a raccoon? I can't tell. Oh, look, a penny. I wonder when it was minted. Can we stop? I have to tie my shoelaces. How long have I been out here anyway? It's getting a little cold. When are my parents going to notice that I left? What was I thinking? Which way is home?" One by one, the questions that child asked led it back home, where it was welcomed with a hug and a light much brighter and much warmer than that which it had been carrying from in the field. As we light our chalice today, may we trust the questions that guide our movements and the light that helps us move forward together. Welcome home.
So Reverend Stefanie Etzbach-Dale, who also goes by Batya Dale, has over 20 years of experience serving UU congregations. She has worked as hospital chaplain at NYU, UCLA, Sequoia Hospital, and currently Stanford Hospital. Affiliated with UU Palo Alto since 2017, Rev. Stefanie focuses on building spiritual courage, resilience, and joy through private spiritual direction sessions, group retreats and workshops, public speaking, organizational development, and art. You can find out more by visiting her website, tendingspirit.com. Our congregation craves depth, so settle in, as now she will tend to our spirits as she takes us on a deep dive into the questions that change us.
As we move into a time of meditation, I invite you to settle into your seat, settle into your body, shake off thoughts of things left undone, things yet to be done, things that were done, all of that. Just set that aside for a moment and let's breathe together, becoming fully present. The words that are on that sheet of paper passed around, if it should come to you, take a glance at it, see if any of those words resonate. I will also be saying words aloud, a poem by Bob McKechnie. And I invite you to allow those words, whether written or spoken, to pass through you, to see if there's something about them that resonates within you. We'll have a moment of silence and then we'll pause to see if there are any reflections that come up as a result. At the bend in the path, the one where the oaks lean in, I stopped for no reason that I could name, only that something in me had quieted enough to notice. A single leaf, not yet fallen, trembled without wind. What held it there? I wondered. Was it habit? Was it devotion? The morning was in transition. Mist was lingering in the low places, and sunlight was testing the edges of things. A song sparrow moved through the underbrush, each small step a kind of listening, each pause a kind of prayer. I thought of the many ways that life can be spent. The rushing, the tallying, the long forgetting of breath, and here, this remarkable moment offering itself without insistence, making no demands of me, just welcome embrace. I stood in the quiet, not ever wanting to leave. Finally, I turned. The path did not change, but I carried something quieter now. Something that didn't need to be named, only followed as one follows a question or faint bird song deeper into the trees, trusting that it will lead exactly here. Let's rest in the embrace of silence for a moment. Before I share my reflections, I'm wondering if anyone had a response to either the quotes that were passed out or to the poem. Did anyone hear in the silence a question rising inside? If so, please raise your hand, name it briefly. I will repeat it so that we can all grow and learn from the light shed by our questions. Yes.
I was reminded, I was able to do a little talk about 6 months ago about a sanctuary, building a sanctuary community. And I came across researching that Howard Thurman's saying there are only two questions, or perhaps the two most important questions we can ask. Where am I going? And who will go with me?
Beautiful. And your name is?
I'm Paul.
Paul. Paul sharing that what came up for him was a quote by Howard Thurman. There are only two important questions. One is where I'm going, and the other is who's going with me. Thank you.
My name is Frida, and what came from me right away was rest in peace. Because whether we're alive and we pass on, as we know that Mark did this week, it's just those are beautiful words.
Thank you. What came up for Frida was the phrase, rest in peace. What a beautiful phrase. Thank you. Yes.
I saw the question, what question did you ask today? And the question in response was, when will the answers ever be as abundant as the questions?
Beautiful. Would you say your name, please?
I don't know if I can. When or if the answers will be as abundant as the questions.
When the answers will be as abundant as the questions was shared by
Nancy.
Nancy, thank you, thank you. And one more? Yes.
Sebastian, I wonder what the ants are doing, going up and down the wall here in the sunlight. Where are the ants going?
Where are the ants going? Sebastian was captivated by the movement of the ants. A very keen observation. Thank you. So I do hope that you get a chance to look at that piece of paper, at those quotes, and maybe use that as a way to spark some conversation during the fellowship hour. It's always interesting to hear what comes up for other people, to maintain a sense of holy curiosity about all the things that we can bring to one another. So today's topic, to close out this month's theme, inspired for me some thoughts about questions, about holy curiosity. Now, in seminary, I was told that there really are no bad questions, there are only bad answers, which sounded both intimidating and reassuring at the same time, until I realized that some questions can actually lead us down a bad, or at least very frustrating path, especially when they're not asked. So here's an example. Recently, my 93-year-old mother shared that her computer was broken and she had not been able to access needed information for months. So when I asked why she waited so long to tell me this, she said she didn't want to bother me. So I took a deep breath and I asked what was wrong with the computer, and she said she needed to know how to get into Word. As it turns out, she was already in Word, so I asked her to ask a different question. Once we identified the right question, it was easy enough to identify options and to ease her agitation, and I think even her shame about all of this, and get her back to feeling productive. Circling around questions, not wanting to ask them, or maybe not knowing how to ask, is not at all unusual. Sometimes it does have to do with not wanting to be a bother. Sometimes it has to do with not wanting to be thought ignorant. It can also be because on a certain level we suspect we may not like the answer. Some questions can reveal cracks in the life of meaning that we have spent years constructing, and those are the ones we are most likely to avoid, and the ones we are most likely to need to ask if our sights are set upon living a life of spiritual integrity. So that's what I want to focus on today, because this is personal to me. There are questions, old questions I've been asking that just aren't cutting it anymore. And I suspect that may be true for others for a variety of reasons. We human beings dance with and live inside such mystery. We have so many questions, including those that remain unacknowledged and unspoken, or aren't precise enough to lead to satisfaction. So why do people choose to join religious community, to come to fellowship? That is a question that I very frequently have. Some consider it a bad question because it should be obvious, I'm told, but it's not necessarily obvious. We each have our own reasons for joining in covenant, for showing up on a Sunday morning, for showing up at Pride Parade, for showing up at the congregational meeting. The best generalization that I can offer, the best answer for right now to that question is because life is complicated. Because life keeps putting before us situations and questions that agitate, that do not resolve neatly, that do not yield the satisfaction or comfort of certainty, and ultimately because we feel alone and desperately want to be known and valued. Does that resonate at all? I see some nods. Thank you. So given that perspective, I continue to be surprised at how often our curiosity about ourselves and about others is dampened, is suppressed, even in the fertile soil of covenanted relationship. It's not unusual for some questions, particularly those questions about our own personal spiritual beliefs and practices, and even about our own politics, to be intentionally withheld and guarded for fear of judgment. Avoiding and sharing hard, risky questions, avoiding the sharing of hard, risky questions can feel like a kindness to ourselves temporarily, as well as to others. And no one wants to be thought a bother or be thought ignorant or get an answer that just raises more questions. So I invite you to think about or imagine for a moment close relationships, maybe ones you've been in or ones that you've observed, in which essential truths about who we are withheld, are not shared. The question that waits silently at the edge of every encounter in such a relationship is, are we still growing together, or are we just maintaining what once was? Do we even know each other, really? Avoiding such questions, it can feel polite. It can feel like a commitment to civil discourse, but that avoidance, from my own experience, I can tell you, it can slowly erode trust. It can erode intimacy and honesty, and it can isolate and in some cases lead to fatal despair. When we stop talking about what's real. Now think about and imagine an aging parent whose needs are increasing, or a sibling who carries more than their share, or the family member who struggles with addiction or job security. What is fair? What is loving? What is kind? What is sustainable? What is my obligation here? When such questions are not asked consistently, compassionately, when they are not acknowledged, when they are not given voice, resentment can quickly grow in the shadows, leading to all sorts of other questions. And then there are those questions we can only ask of ourselves. What is it that I truly believe about who I am, about my place and my purpose in this world? What am I afraid of? What am I waiting for? What am I prepared to let go of? And what is it I'm clinging to? And why? And what impact is that having? Is it helpful? Is it empowering me to live a life of meaning and spiritual integrity? When was the last time you had a date with yourself to ask yourself such questions? Any and all of these questions can unsettle the stories that we have constructed about our lives. And yet without them, when we don't ask such questions, we risk living on autopilot, guided more by habit than by the values that we proclaim. Sometimes the challenge is not just asking hard questions, but recognizing when we're asking the wrong ones altogether. When the questions that we've inherited or grown comfortable with no longer lead to insight, no longer inspire us to live lives of meaning, no longer lead to satisfaction. when they circle in on themselves, when they solidify, agitate, making it impossible for new possibilities to germinate. Some hard questions, as it turns out, can, mostly in hindsight, be recognized as transformative. So here's an example from my own life. For years, I've been asking prayerful questions about the mysteries of ultimate reality, yearning to feel closer to divine truth, to that great mystery known by so many names and beyond all naming, hoping that that would lead me to a better understanding of who I am and what I'm supposed to be doing while I'm here. This past year, after an unexpected medical diagnosis, I realized that old question, those old questions, they were not going anywhere. They were just circling in on themselves. They were not helpful to the real life situation that I was facing. I had decisions to make, so I needed a whole new set of questions. So instead of focusing my questions on the mysteries out there, I chose to focus the questions on the mysteries in here, and there are plenty. The question became, who am I beyond my tenuous physical health? Who am I beyond the routines that have now been disrupted, my ability or inability to pursue familiar interests? Who am I beyond my fascination with theological mysteries? What is my essence? That was a terrifying question to ask myself, even though it is one that I regularly ask my clients and the folks that I visit when I'm on rounds at the hospital. Terrifying also was, what am I prepared to give up? What am I prepared to do, to endure, in order to assure that this indefinable, mysterious essence of mine, whatever it may be, can have a few more good years to express itself productively through this aging body? And what if I'm not strong enough? That question still sets me a-shivering. The pivot to a different set of questions, a set of questions much more personal, brought me, as it turns out, that much closer to what I had been seeking all along. I just hadn't been asking the right questions. So I'm prompted now here with you to pay attention to some broader areas of concern, starting with governance and politics. We live in a time, in a political context that is revealing a lot of things long taken for granted, a lot of things long left unquestioned. That rapidly changing context is asking new questions of all of us. Not just who did you vote for, but what's your take on this or that latest soundbite? What sources do you trust? Have you voted? What are you voting for? How are your values reflected in how you're showing up? A question that does not seem to get asked often enough is, in the midst of all of this, is are you able to discern pathways of hope through all of this? Do you feel motivated to help pave them? Because we all need hope. As misinformation spreads more easily than truth, the hard questions we need to be asking ourselves are, how do I know what it is I think I know? Whose voices are missing? What is my responsibility, and what do I need in order to carry that responsibility? Given that we just celebrated Memorial Day and Flag Day is coming up, as is July 4th, what does it mean to be an American? What does it mean to honor sacrifice in a way that deepens our commitment to care for the living? Avoiding these kinds of questions isolates us from one another and from our sources of strength. It leaves us vulnerable not just as individuals, but as a society. Then there's climate change. Let's talk about that for a moment. There are questions about that I am so afraid to ask. Are we really past the tipping point? What will life look like in 20 years, in 10 years, in 5 years? Do I want to be here for all of that? What, if anything, can I do? How do I prepare? How do I grieve what is lost without succumbing to grief? How do I prepare my children and grandchildren? I am so afraid of the answers to those questions that it can feel so much easier to turn away, to numb myself, to distract myself. But these questions need to be asked. The cost of avoidance is always borne by the most vulnerable. And since everyone and everything is interconnected, there is no avoiding the repercussions. Ultimately, those questions will have to be faced and dealt with. Last but not least, systemic racial, economic, and social injustice. The questions that keep pulling at me are, where do I benefit from the systems that I did not create? How do I stay in conversation? How do I stay engaged meaningfully in sustainable ways? Those questions challenge my identity. They challenge my sense of comfort, my long-held assumptions. But without such questions, how will things change? How will we be present to all the changes already happening? Unitarian Universalism does not expect us to find a one-size-fits-all answer. It asks something both more demanding and more liberating: to stay with the questions, to keep asking. In the words of James Luther Adams, the faith of a liberal is faith in the power of the human spirit to create and recreate meaningful order in the face of disorder. This is not a call to certainty. It is a call to engagement, to curiosity, holy curiosity and holy creativity. The poet Rainer Maria Rilke offers this: knowing how frustrating, how hard all of this can be. Be patient toward all that is unresolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves. Not because the questions are easy to love, but because they are alive within us and among us. Those questions are the fertile soil in which truth and love and justice can germinate, connecting us with what is most true and precious and essential about ourselves and about the mystery of life. To honor the transformative power of hard questions means to be able to hold multiple truths at once. Starting with the truth that mystery is real. Yes, there are some things that we're just not going to be able to figure out today. But also that we are responsible for seeking understanding within those mysteries. Staying curious about all of it is a way of affirming our essence as unique individuals and our purpose as part of this interdependent web. So, how do we live this way? Embedded in complexity, guided by moral values, free to ask, but limited in our ability to know much of anything with certainty. I don't have the answers, but I have an idea. First, we recognize courageous curiosity as a spiritual and practical moral imperative. When you feel the urge to turn away from a difficult conversation, a challenging idea, an uncomfortable truth, pause, lean in, and ask another question. Listen. Ask one more question than feels comfortable, and listen not to respond, but to understand. Let your curiosity be stronger than your fear, and see what happens. Second, make space for both silence, stillness, the quietude that we heard about in our opening words, and study. Honor mystery by allowing moments where not everything has to be solved right away. Sit with awe. Sit with grief. Sit with wonder. Notice the thoughts and the feelings that move through you. Those that wear you out and those that animate your relationships with joy and awe and gratitude. And alongside that, commit to learning, reading, engaging, questioning sources, expanding your perspective. A healthy spiritual life is built through both contemplation and ongoing inquiry. Third, link and act with both humility and accountability. We rarely, if ever, have all the information needed, all our ducks in a row in order to know anything with certainty, including which questions to ask. There is that. And that our answers, however we come upon them, will always be partial. I'm sorry, they will. They will always be partial and evolving. So we need to be willing to listen for other possibilities. When we feel so certain about something, we need to be willing to change our mind. The freedom to seek truth is inseparable from the responsibility to live that truth in relationship with mystery, including the mystery of ultimate reality, the mystery of others, the mystery of our own lives, and what choices could best honor those relationships. This is not an easy path. It asks more of us than avoidance ever will. But it also offers more: a life that's honest, a life that's depthful, fertile, connected, useful, meaningful, and productive. So I could end there, but the last set of questions I want to leave you with are in response to that last word. What was it? Productive. Repeat after me. Productive. The desire to be productive is what I have sought personally for most of my life, and yes, I learned it from my mother. And it's a big part of what brought me to Unitarian Universalist community and ministry, because it's one of the things we tend to have in common right off the bat. UUs are good at rolling up our sleeves and just doing what needs to be done, being productive. And as time and gravity take hold, as circumstances change, as new priorities inevitably urge their way into our consciousness, that drive to do can become unsustainable. The drive to do things the way we used to. It can invite, not just inviting, but demanding new hard questions about being, doing, and being. What does that look like today? So questions like, who am I when I can no longer do the things I used to? Who am I when I can't find my way home? Who am I when I become the one in need of others' compassion and generosity? Do I dare to ask for it? Can I receive it? Can I risk vulnerability about all of this with my community? Now, it's one thing to ask ourselves these questions in our private moments of vulnerability. That can be frustrating or difficult enough, but I want to suggest that these are exactly the kinds of questions that deserve to be asked here in the context of covenanted community. Because by choosing to be here in this context, every day we are affirming our shared commitment to be curious about and to honor the experiences of every individual without rebuke, without shame. Because covenant binds us in supportive relationship, and because we know enough to love the questions that can arise and that do arise in such fertile soil, including questions about what the ants are doing up there. When the goal is not to extract the answer, but to create space for greater depths of honesty and connection, we find ourselves exploring not only what is necessary, but also what is possible. Imagine that. And that just may be as close as we get to knowledge of divine truth, of that great mystery known by many names and beyond all naming. So take a deep breath with me. May compassionate presence to the questions within and among us create a deeper sense of being and belonging, fostering sustainable presence to the holy work of truth and love and justice and hope. So may it be.